When are you going to quit calling me Mr. Bonecutter, for God's sakes? I mean, I ain't that much older than you, am I? I mean, can you call me Old Hank? Or
I'll give it a shot.
You don't want folks to think you and me are buddies and I don't get tickets and all that kind of stuff. I did have a chance to meet one of your fine officers this week, and it really didn't really go my way. But he was doing a good job.
First I've heard about that one. You can tell me about that.
I'll tell you during the break, but no,
Okay.
it's during the bomb scare. It's pretty interesting, pretty tense. I mean, I can't imagine being in law enforcement and having to be involved in a bomb scare. I mean, there was a bomb, but anyway, you guys have a tough job to do. Obviously, we've talked about this a million times, and being out and about in traffic yesterday afternoon, it's a circus, man. Nobody knows that better than you guys. I just don't see how in the world you keep your wits about you. All this traffic, south, Wilma Rudolph, north, you guys are... I mean, you do a great job, but how do you cover it?
Well, what we've noticed, and I'm glad you mentioned that as far as doing a good job, our accidents last year were down 600 in 08 compared to 07, 654. It was an outstanding job that, and of course that goes along with all the troops being deployed. However, that was probably our best year that we've had in some time, and there's been numerous deployments in the last 5 to 6 years, as we all know. Now, with the troops back this time, we've certainly noticed the volume of traffic going up, and our accidents are actually up over last year. But we expected that with the influx of the troops coming in. When you're talking about 25,000 more troops plus their families on the road, then yes, we have quite a bit to deal with.
And how do you, I guess the way you go about trying to monitor that or affect that is... Do you set up, you're more visible, or are there certain areas that you take more interest in? Because I know you can't be everywhere all the time, and, the old saying, there's never a cop there when you need one kind of thing. They just can't be everywhere. But when this happens, what do your traffic units, what do they do to try to have a presence so folks know we're here?
Well, yes, sir. Just like crime, we track our traffic every week. We stay on top of it. We know where they're happening at. The majority of our actions, we split them up into the 3 districts. The majority of our 2 main concerns are, of course, Wilma Rudolph and Fort Campbell Boulevard. But with that being said, we get a lot of requests for other traffic. Like, for instance, the other day I got one from Meriwether Road. We do our best to get cars out there when we can, to run radar, because we get a lot of speed enforcement requests. But like I said, we track our accidents every week. We stay on top of it. We know how many we're having. We know where they're having, and that's where we put our officers at.
I think folks need to realize and try to remind them as often as we can of the places where you are most interested in and places in town that are really not your responsibility. We've been through this before on the Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway. That's a state road, even though it's in the city limits, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, and then there's the 101 Parkway, the Purple Heart Parkway. Now, that's a state road.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, right? But it's in the city limits, and a lot of us are confused as, so whatever. Why, well, Madison Street, 41A, is a state road. And so you're not really obligated to have a real presence out in there. That's confusing, I think, to city residents. How do you all approach that, and why will you not? Because, I mean, the 101 Parkway is Talladega, man. You know it is. It's Talladega. And how does the police department approach all that?
Actually, we enforce all traffic laws within the city limits. Now, we have been, question has been asked about why don't we enforce traffic laws out on the interstate. Well, the THP does a fine job. They deal with that. We don't go out there and enforce traffic laws. And you're right about Purple Heart, because we've got, and we've actually been out there hitting the Purple Heart and Jordan Road. We've had some problems out there. So, but we do enforce all traffic laws within the city limits, regardless if it's a city road or a state highway.
Yeah. So I know that when we had this incident out on the connector, we had a couple of deaths, unfortunately, earlier this year, some accidents there, and you felt your department had a presence out there for a while, which is sort of normal. And some folks may think it's a sort of a reaction instead of proactive, but you just can't be everywhere all the time. And the red light cameras, which we'll talk about. There are a lot of folks who really feel good about these red light cameras. There appears to be one local website that has a real hard time with the red light cameras, and without even giving them a chance to affect traffic, I guess. And you've been as far as I can remember, from the beginning, you weren't real sure of the red light cameras, but I think after you researched or came to know or got to see how they affected other communities, you kind of got on board, and now you're fully behind the red light cameras, 3 of which we have up now.
Well, exactly. We've been looking at these things, red light enforcement, for years. I want to say at least 5 years, well before I took over as chief. And we went to one other jurisdiction, Knoxville. We looked at what their stats were. And what we found was they did decrease accidents at intersections. Over half of our accidents are at intersections, and that is where your more serious accidents happen. Side impact crashes, that's what we're looking at reducing. I think it's been proven that these things do reduce that. This has been a controversial topic, of course, over the last year, I would say. And the way I look at it is, as far as enforcement, you have a picture of the car, the violator, running the light, the picture of the light red, the violator passed the stop bar. We advertise this thing for who knows how long. Everybody in town's talking about it. There are signs approaching the intersection, speed enforcement ahead. The way I look at it, and now we're in a phase where we're doing 30 days of warning citations.
Which is kind of hilarious. I mean, and you say it with such a straight face, you know, it's hilarious that, okay, we're going to let you run a red light for 30 days.
Yes, sir, but I think it goes behind the, it reinforces the fact that we're trying to cut down accidents. It's not based on just trying to pull in revenue. It's basically, we're advertising it.
Right.
We've talked about it for years. It's been in the paper for, it's one of the hottest topics in town. And I think once these things do go up and running as of June 1st, where actual citations are issued out, not too many excuses, or at least I'm not going to listen to any. And I've told the officers that work for us, you get one, you'll pay it. I get one, I'll pay it. No excuses as far as I'm concerned.
Well, if you run a red light and there's an officer sitting at the intersection, you're busted. I don't understand it. You pay a fine, you're nailed. And the technology is such that you're nailed. I think we all have a problem with a computer running our life. I don't know, a video or something. Let's take a caller. Good morning. Hello, JZM.
Good morning, Mr. Hank. This is Pastor Jerkins. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning, Pastor Jerkins.
Thank you. Listen, I thank you for being on this morning, sharing the information about the police work. I think you're doing a good job. I have a question, then a comment about the red lights. Why do you announce where the red lights are? And if that's going to be a practice as you put them up all over the city.
All right. Thank you, Pastor. Well, the thing is, I think when it was all passed, that you all identified like the top 10 intersections that you wanted to monitor, and that's where you were going to first put cameras up. I know Councilman Gino Grubbs was in here last week talking about it. So like 600 of them in Chicago.
Yes.
So I mean that's a big city.
Well, that's a very good question. It's much like why we advertise when we do a DUI saturation patrol. Why do we advertise when we do a DUI roadblock? We want people to know it's a deterrence. We're not out there trying to write tickets just to bring in revenue. It's a deterrence to driving habits. We run a DUI roadblock. We're advertising don't get out there and drive intoxicated. Don't get out here and run red lights. What the interesting point behind these red light cameras, it's not just affecting the 3 intersections they're going in at. It's affecting people's driving habits, I think, all over the city, because when you approach a intersection, you don't know, as a driver, it may be red light enforced. Now, I think that's the interesting point. We advertise DUI saturation patrols. You see them in the paper all the time. We're not out there trying to trap people. We're not out there trying to, it's not a speed trap or much like I like to use Coopertown. We want driving habits to change. That is the only way that you stop these fatal accidents that you had, such as we're talking about the connector. We want people's driving habits to stop. We don't stop that bad driving habits, these bad accidents from happening, alone, just by enforcement alone. We have to use other methods, and advertisement is the best way. When you see one of these DUI roadblocks out there, you will say, man, if you've ever been through one, I'm not taking another sip of alcohol and driving out here. So that's what we do that for.
It's required, though, now, isn't it? I mean, you're required to advertise that. And
yes, sir.
Again, the element of surprise, people are wondering, but, if you come up on, who's going to remember, I mean, maybe a handful of people who spend too much time behind the wheel while stoned or drunk, will go, oh, I don't need to go out there. Yeah, I can't stay out about, they're not going to figure that out at 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever. But the red light cameras, as he was asking, Pastor Jerkins was asking earlier, it's been in the media because, again, the council had to consider, based on expert input, where you guys wanted them to be. And so I just think it's hilarious that there's this 30-day period. There's this 30-day probation. It's almost like saying, it's almost giving critics the fuel for their fire about, we don't need to trust these things. There are flaws in these things. Well, if you have a cop, there's human error. That's existed forever. I just have never understood. I've read articles about studies in France, studies in Iowa, like blah, 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 let's see what happens here, Let's just see how they work.
Well, it's much like officer discretion. And I'll speak from experience, if I'm out and I'm running radar and you're issuing tickets and I approach a violator and I feel that a warning would suffice and change that particular violator's driving habits, they realize what they've done. Sometimes a warning, verbal warning, just, slow down, be careful. If they're, apologetic, saying, I'm sorry, we have discretion. Now, we don't cite every single violator out there. Oh, and I certainly didn't myself.
You don't?
No, sir, I did not. As some officers now, I will say, that
you want us all to think you're a big softy, huh?
I know, sir.
No, thank God they don't write everybody up. Oh, Lord, I'd have lost my license years ago. But, no, I think that is important, discretion. And I've had warnings. And truly, it happens to all of us, and more so now with phones and so forth, that you're just not paying attention. You are just whatever. And, Lord, you're doing 60 before you know it in a 40. And I'm not sure you'd get a warning for that. But anyway, there are a lot of reasons. And I'll tell you, the worst way to not get out of a ticket is to say, what'd you pull me over for? You start that dialogue right away, and it's like, we're doing some paperwork, aren't we? Huh?
That is correct. And that was, if speaking from my own experience, nobody else's, if I approached the car and that was the attitude after knowing that this individual was speeding, pretty much my mind was made up.
Sure. Chief Al Ansley is our guest, city police chief here, and we appreciate him, as always, our guests who drop by. Saturday mornings, their day off, time to do other things, and we appreciate them. We were talking about the red light cameras, which went online Friday. And, let's take a caller here real quick before I start another thought. Good morning. Hello, JZM.
Hey, Mr. Bonecutter.
Yeah, what's up?
Hey, this is David Crocker with the SWAT team.
Hey, now, dude, tell the chief what you said about his golf game. Go ahead.
Yeah, he needs some lessons, sir.
Hey, yeah, we talked about that a minute ago. What's up?
Hey, I wanted to call in and let you know that we're out here at the Montgomery County Shoot Complex. They've got a big trap ski competition. And we're out here trying to raise some money for our shoot house project, trying to sell some T-shirts and trying to raise some donations. So if your listeners can come on out and check it out, it's supposed to be anywhere from 3,000 competitive shooters out here. They need to come check it out.
That's awesome. Tell everybody how to get there.
They just go out 48, turn left on Southside Road, go about 6 miles. The entrance to the complex is on the right, and they just follow the paved road around, and they'll see us. We got a booth out here, and not to mention all this trap ski competition is pretty neat. Now to come check it out.
Hey, listen, man, I got to tell you something. I could have used you yesterday.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, if I'd have had your number, I could have called you. I had a serious, vicious critter in my station yesterday.
Oh, who was that?
I had a groundhog in my newsroom.
Oh, you don't have a handgun carry permit, Mr. Bonecutter?
I may. But I'd like somebody else to take the heat for killing a groundhog at the radio station. I'm just kidding.
Well, we'll have to call I believe it's Mr. Selby from Animal Control. We'll see if
he came out. He was great. He really was. He came out and shoot him out. We named him and everything. Gary has a video on it, but nonetheless, you guys are out at the shooting complex today. I hope a lot of folks will go out for that. We've been talking about it since you came in, and hope everything goes well. Your fundraising is going good?
Yeah, we're up to about $20,000 now in donations, and I've heard you on the radio, soliciting our project, and we appreciate that. And our website is up. We should have online donations pretty quick, and the website's www.d7ttc.org.
All right, David, thanks for calling, man. Y'all have a good day. Appreciate it.
All right.
All right,
Hey, Chief, have a good weekend, sir. Ride your bicycle.
All right, he told the chief to have a good weekend and ride his bike. Now, you guys sound like you have an instant relationship. You know, he's a good guy. You know,
He's a great guy. I'm so glad that he took the time to call. I would like to comment on that shoot house, 100% behind it. It's training is, and I can go on and on about it. He, of course, is our training director, has done an outstanding job. I would make my way out to the shoot house today. I do have a prior commitment this afternoon. Right. But I'm so glad he's listening. I'm sure I'll hear about it Monday.
Yeah, that's good. But, you know, the bottom line is, as you smile at the camera, is that you get the final word. I understand that. Chief Al Ainsley's arguing, hey, man, I understand what time it is. It's interesting. I'm probably one of the few people in town that wave at Chief Ainsley when he's in traffic, you know. You know, I was like, what else? I saw you downtown the other day, rolled down the west side. What's up, Chief? And it's like, leave me alone. I'm busy. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, the shoot house is a great idea. Training we've talked a lot about. We've been talking about the red light cameras here. And, again, they're up and on and up and running. So keep that in mind. You know, if you don't, Gino Grubbs told us last week, you know, if you don't run the red light, what's the problem? You know, if you're not speeding, what's the problem? There is no problem. I don't know why anybody has a problem with the thing. But that's just my opinion. Good morning. Hello, JZM.
Yes, good morning. Question for Chief Ainsley, please.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Chief.
Good morning.
Chief, I wanted to ask you one question on this red light cameras. I saw them. I saw the one at Gate 3 when I went in there yesterday.
Did you smile?
I saw that the camera is on the other side of the road. And is the camera positioned to take pictures of the vehicles going north or the vehicles turning into Gate 3?
All right. Thanks for that.
That particular intersection will be monitored only on northbound lanes. We will not have a camera on the southbound lanes due to the fact that Fort Campbell actually owns part of that property there, so we could not place one to monitor southbound traffic. We will be monitoring the northbound, however. That includes the right turn there, so it's a very good question.
Yeah. Thanks for the calls forever. And you talked earlier about it being a hot topic and so forth. And I'm trying to, in my own simple mind, try to understand what is the bottom line problem now all of a sudden with these red light cameras. When I look back as a media person following the process of from A to Z or start to finish on getting this thing going, why we never heard any of this stuff along the way. It's almost like the city charter and the controversy around that deal is that, well, we never heard any of this during the time period when we should have been hearing about this. You know, the people who are up in arms about these cameras, who have a problem with these red light cameras, why we never heard any of that. And I'm not saying everybody didn't send a letter to the paper or whatever. But in front of the council, why there weren't groups of folks or individuals who were saying, you know, we don't need this, or, you know, whatever. But, you know, keeping it as simple as I can so I can understand it, it's like, well, if you don't run red lights, you ain't got a problem. If you're not speeding out on the connector road, you ain't got a problem. And I don't want to oversimplify, but I've run red lights. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I haven't. I've run stop signs, and I've done it on purpose, and I've done it inadvertently. And so when we ask the question about the red light cameras changing driving, it will change my driving habits in the sense that I'm going to be more conscious about these intersections because it has unfortunately happened to me, and it will happen to others. And I think that incident scenario is what bothers people, is that if I inadvertently run a red light, if I'm not paying attention, well, that's my fault. Or if I get, you know how you get kind of caught up with behind someone going through an intersection, you're watching that car and you're not watching the light. So that car has led you through that red light and now you're nailed. So, but I know, Chief, that's not your problem. The bottom line is you deal on facts, and the law is such that, you know, we'll have these cameras. I don't like the implication that it's just a money grab.
And I agree, and you said it better than I could have said it. You inadvertently run a red light at Connector in Madison, and you might end up in the hospital or worse.
Exactly.
And
but if a cop saw you run a red light, and it's like you were talking earlier, when you pull somebody over, you kind of make a call when you meet the driver about, you know, if I run this red light and I knew I ran the red light and I didn't do it on purpose, I wasn't trying to speed my way through there to get to the next line or whatever, and you pull me over and you come to the car, I'm like, dude, I know I did it. I wasn't paying attention. It was a mistake. It freaked me out. Write me a ticket. I deserve a ticket. I mean, I've done that before. And they're like, well, that judgment call is such, well, I'm not going to write you a ticket. I just want you to be careful and pay attention to this, that, and the other. See, the cameras don't give you that option. And I think a lot of folks who have a problem with the cameras, that's the problem they have. Well, there's no way for me to talk my way out of this ticket.
Well, that kind of goes back to the warning cycle that we're in now. There's your discretion. It's advertised. We're giving red flags, or we're giving warning citations for a month. Mm-hmm. So actually there is discretion there. And we're advertising where these things are at, and it basically comes down to, if you run it now, I'm sorry, I don't have any sympathy for you.
All right, let's take a call. Good morning. Hello, JCM.
Good morning, Brother Hank.
How you doing?
All right. This is my thing about these lights. I think it's the greatest thing. I think we complain about everything. We complain about the traffic, complain about accidents. Well, I think this is a good problem that we found a solution for. Now, I think we can get over this, and I think, man, the chief got other problems and other programs he's working with now. We're starting to do some good things in the city, and, we're never going to please 100% of the people. But I tell you what, we don't got all these lawsuits going on. Our officers are trying to do their best. They're involved. We got Marshall doing out there a good program. Him and Cologne are doing good things. We got the Explorer program. So I think we got so many other good things going on. And I think this light issue is great for our city. And we're just going along in better things along with our police department. So I just want to tell Chief he's doing a good job. And this light issue, it's so old. I think let's get over it. It works, and it'll make our streets safer.
Thank you, Tommy. Appreciate you calling. Police Chief Al Ansley, go ahead.
No, I appreciate that comment. That's exactly how I feel. I'm more concerned, not that I'm not concerned about the red light cameras, but I'm more concerned with officer safety. There's a lot of violence out there. It seems to be picking up toward police officers. Everybody knows about Oakland, Pittsburgh, recently in Alabama. So that is my main concern, is the safety of my officers. We just talked about training, Lieutenant Clarksville. And I appreciate him bringing that up. We've got a lot of good programs out there, and this red light thing is I know it's a hot topic. It's controversial. Another tool, yes, sir. And in my opinion, the way I feel, exactly the same. Let's move on. I think let's go. All right. Let's find other topics to talk about.
Well, we'll do that before Gary makes you mad. I don't want him to make you mad about any of this stuff. So we'll be back with more of our interview with Chief Ansley in a moment, right after this. Back 9:34. Welcome to WJCM Radio. This is Clarksville In Review, and we appreciate all of you and your calls and comments, your emails, your suggestions. We appreciate that you enjoy the program, and we enjoy being here. Gary Baker is here from tvclarksville.com. Gary Baker, the video maker. That's his new name. And you can see all these interviews on his website at tvclarksville.com, city, county meetings, all sorts of local video. So check that out. Police Chief Al Ansley is with us this hour. Before we get back to the chief, we have on the line with us Denis Skidmore. She is the wife of one of Chief's top cops, Jay Skidmore, I believe. And Denise joins us now. They're having a big fuel fundraiser this morning. Hey, Denise, how you doing?
Hey, Hank, how are you?
Everything's good. What's up? Tell me what you guys are up to today.
We are partnering with the Clarksville Association of Realtors again for our annual fuel fundraiser. This is our second one. Our first one was last year, same location.
All right, you can go out to that event today. I also got a call earlier from a young lady, I want to say with the Red Hat Society or the Red Hat Girls. Somebody help me with this. And they're having something, I want to say at the Madison Street Methodist Church. I don't know, a book sale or an event there. But they called earlier. I didn't want to not mention that. Police Chief Al Ansley is with us, and we appreciate him coming in, although we have issues, Chief. I just wanted you to know. What are you laughing at? What are you laughing at? I have a serious issue here. What is with you shoving this Alabama crap in my face every time you come in here? I'm just kidding.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
He's got his big Alabama jersey. Every time he comes in here, it's Alabama jersey. So
that one goes out to Crockrell. I hope you're listening.
Yeah, he's a big UT fan, I guess, isn't he?
Yeah.
So anyway, we appreciate Chief Ansley for being with us. You talked earlier about we've had a lot of terrible news about attacks on police. It's funny, I was watching a documentary last night about an investigation into an incident like that. I'm not going to reference it much, but that's the biggest thing you worry about? I mean, I know you're very concerned about your officer safety. You've said it many times, and training is so integral in that. I have somewhat of a personal interest in the training of our police officers simply because you have a new officer you and I've talked about who I've known since he was a child, which just goes to show how doggone old I am. But anyway, so I'm very concerned about the training he gets. And now he's out there, you know, patrolling the streets, and they can be very vulnerable. And when troops are back, population has gotten up, and, you know, people get out and enjoy and so forth. Are you ever find yourself happy with the training you're able to provide?
No. I'm happier now than what we've been in some time. I don't think you can ever get enough training. And that is my number one concern, is the safety of the police officers. If you look at some of these, the Pittsburgh shooting, for instance, that was a routine call. That was a family dispute that these officers showed up to. One of the officers that was killed in that particular incident was on his way home to his family. He heard the call, and he backed these officers up, and he ended up being shot and killed. What's interesting to that, and I'm very passionate about this, during that time, the Oakland to Pittsburgh incident happened. If you are familiar with the Dallas incident where the football player was stopped by the officer and he was detained and he was not able to attend his mother-in-law's death.
Yes, I remember that.
Which was bad. But the thing that really stung me about that was that got far more publicity than any of the other two incidents. I recently hired 3 officers, and I could go on and on about this, and I know you have a time limitation here, but I recently hired 3 officers, and I asked them about all 3 incidents. They did not know anything about the Pittsburgh, the Oakland shootings of the officers. They did know about that Dallas incident.
Right.
He made a mistake, but matter of fact, we even had a local radio station put one of our officers on to talk about that particular incident, officer discretion, stopping people.
We had a local radio station here?
Yes, not yours. But
well, I know it wasn't, but who else would be,
yes.
who else would care?
Well, Jim Knoll went on to one of the stations, I believe it was, I'm not sure. I'm not sure which one it was. I don't want to, it's not that it was bad.
Right.
I'm just talking about how much publicity these incidents get. And we don't talk about the family members of these 3 officers that sacrificed their life, or the officers in Oakland, that the particular incident out there, Alabama, which I just mentioned recently. We get almost on a daily basis, we're seeing some violence against police officers. And it's picking up, and it is my number one concern at this police department.
You know, what's bothersome about that, being an old dog, is there was a time, and there is, of course, in my generation, there was a time when you had a lot of respect for law enforcement officers. You had a lot of respect, you know. When you saw them, you waved. When you bumped into them on duty or off, you spoke. When you were pulled over by them, or you had occasion to be involved with them, whatever, you know, there was a lot of respect. That has deteriorated, I think, over the years. Now, you're a relatively young man, and you still remember those days. But as a top cop, and seeing how society, and I blame the media for a lot of it, and I'm a member of the media, and I blame the media a lot. And that incident you mentioned right away, they wore it out about a mistake, and cops are human, they make mistakes. But it just seems that what do we do to change the perception of police officers in today's young people? You know, DARE programs don't get the support they need. In-school programs, community programs don't get the support and the publicity they need to change the impression of a police officer. It's almost like right out of the gate, most people feel like you the enemy. And that's very unfortunate. I don't blame you. I'd never do it. I don't blame you guys for being concerned and having more training. I mean, for the most part, well over 50, 60% of the public, you know, you're the enemy. I don't want nothing to do with you, man. I'm gonna do whatever I can to defeat you. That bother you?
It does, and just from our police department, Pastor Jerkins and Pastor Tommy brought it up. We are running programs at this department now we've never done in the past. And our sole interest is to rebuild our reputation, to reach out to the community. We're not doing these programs such as Operation Turnaround, Explore program because we like to. It's a lot of work for us. It's a lot more work for us. It brings a lot of liability onto us, and we're doing it with a lot of private donations and grant money. We are doing this to sincerely go out there, reach out to the youth of the community. I think if we turn one of these kids around, then we've succeeded. And that's an old cliche, but we could just be sitting on our hands, writing tickets, making arrests, but that is not what we are doing. We're trying to build our reputation. I tell my officers all the time, act professional, treat people with respect, and of course we've got 200, almost 250 officers down there, and sometimes, yes, we have a tendency, we get complaints about rudeness. Treat people with respect, just like you would like to be treated, and I think we're succeeding in that by not just the programs we're running, but each individual officers. And I tell them all the time, and I've gone on record as saying, you know, I would like to see officers be competitive with the rest of the state, and by doing so,
well, pay them, exactly.
Yes, well, yes, sir. But the taxpayers, the citizens that you're dealing with, they're the ones that are out there paying your salary, and that's what my number one goal has been since taking over, to rebuild our reputation, to get out there, reach out to people, earn their respect, rebuild our reputation. Now, I think, thanks to the officers out there on the street, I think we're succeeding.
Yeah, I have issues with people who want to complain about what police or sheriffs or paramedics or firefighters make. You know, the common response in this community is that, well, you know, firefighters only work every third day or whatever. You know, well, who cares? You know, police officers, they work what do they work? 4 12-hours? So they have the choice. They do 4 12-hour gigs. Is that it?
Our patrol shifts are 4 12.
Well, who cares? You know, I don't understand why. That's, you know, well, you know, they make good money for when they work. I'm like, hell no, they don't make good money for when they work. People shoot at them. Fires, roofs fall on them. We had an explosion, last week. Firefighters already on the scene, and for some reason, garage explodes. I heard it right across the way from my house. Firefighter darn near gets killed. So, no, they don't ever get paid enough. Teachers never get paid enough. You know, you shoot at me, I ain't enough money in the world that I could make to do that. And God bless them, there are people that do it.
Well, we had an incident earlier this year, an officer responding to a 1052, which is a robbery.
I knew that, by the way.
Yes, sir. And he was actually shot at. I'm not going to mention his name, but he was... Thanks to his training, and I think if you talk to him, he will say the same thing. I think that's what saved his life. That was never publicized, or at least out to the media. We actually, our District 2, and I'm going to throw some dap out to them, to those guys, did an excellent job. We've tracked that down. We've actually made arrests in that case. But
what is DAP now? You threw me a curve there.
A little bit of...
some props.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm learning to get your lingo. You've taught me. I'm learning things.
I'm sure Croc will. I'll get a comment on that one too, Monday. But
I'd like to get in a room with you two guys when you're having a meeting, just like I'm not there. I need to check that out sometime.
He normally gets the best of me, but he normally gets the best of anybody.
I can't imagine that. You the chief. But
throw Frankie in there, and we'd have a pretty good time.
Well, Frankie has a horse.
Yeah, yes, sir.
So I mean, you know, you can't catch Frankie. He's on a horse. Chief Gray, we're talking about 9:45. Chief Al Ansley is with us. I hope that over the course of these visits and these interviews with our law enforcement community, we had the sheriff. Well, you know, we as many, and we would love to talk about our law enforcement because it is such a tough job, and you get no respect from it, you know, at all. That you will appreciate, you know, the efforts they make. And a lot of the stuff we talk about, that doesn't get a lot of publicity. It really doesn't. You know, because, you know, newscasts would be boring if we were talking about, you know, community youth programs and, you know, training for officers and so forth and so on. We got to, you know, we all understand what time it is. But, you know, they do a really good job, and it is tough, and it's getting even tougher. You seeing anything in our society that's kind of curious to you that you need to be on the lookout for or be aware of? I mean, I know we've had way too many of these little bomb scares here the last couple of weeks. I don't know if that's the flavor of the month or not, but those have to kind of be prickly, I think.
Well, you mentioned that, and of course the way the economy is now, and I think our community, we're actually, like I said, we track crime every week, and our crime is actually, as of right now, compared to last year, and that's how we measure ourselves. It's better. It's actually lower. But that being said, the number of violent crimes that we're seeing, not only here but across the nation, and that's what causes my concern, raises my concern. And these officers are out there on the street. There's more weapons out there on the street. And, of course, during bad economic times, people are out of work, crime goes up.
You know it's coming.
Yes, sir.
I mean, you know when things get that way, that they're coming. I mean, pharmacy robberies, lawnmower thefts. I think I got a report earlier this week. Has there been a rash of, like, bicycle thefts or something? That I want to say I got a report earlier this week that a certain district.
Motorcycle thefts, yes.
Motorcycle thefts, okay.
And we have made, I think, District 3, we've actually made some arrests on some of those motorcycle thefts. We hit a week before. I missed ComStat this week, and I hate it when I do that because I kind of lose track on a weekly basis. But we made a pop a couple of weeks ago on some motorcycles out in District 3, Captain Gibson and his crew. So very, very good turnout.
Yeah. Well, there's obviously need for money, and you know that's coming. And you can't be everywhere all the time, obviously, but with video surveillance and so forth, it seems like sometimes, I think this last pharmacy robbery has to just be one of the big goobers on the planet. I mean, I hate to say that, but I mean, they're all goobers, I think. You know, they'll boldly walk into a pharmacy in the middle of the day, and, you know, God knows you, there's cameras everywhere. And I don't know. And so not only that, but guy hides his stash and says, well, I'll just come back later, and then, you know, you guys must have had, I know the sheriff handled all that, but you had to have a big chuckle about that.
Once in a while we do. We've talked about it before.
Come on, you shut the door and laugh your ears off.
Yes, sir.
You know, I mean, you need
you have to laugh a little bit on this job. That's correct.
What do you get about people who want to outrun the cops? We had an incident come through the county. It wasn't really ours. You know, it started, I think, in Stewart County, and that's how. And I'll never forget sitting back here one morning in the newsroom. There was not a groundhog in there at the time, and we had the scanner on, and I heard a workhouse breakout. And I followed that thing on the radio all the way down to Davidson County. Now, it was very serious, and I don't want to make light of it, but it was the funniest thing I ever listened to. My father, back in the day, he died in 1980 when these police scanners, apparently everybody could get them. He's from Dayton, Ohio. We'd be visiting Dayton, and we'd sit there all night, and it was the best entertainment on the planet was listening to police scanner. And so I'm listening, and now you see them on TV. You know, you see all the high-speed pursuits, and they're not funny. They're not funny, and we'll get to that in a minute. But what is it you think that makes people feel like they can outrun the cops?
I think it's not that they feel they can outrun them, but it's the fear of going to jail, getting caught. I've been involved in a few myself, these pursuits. Of course, we don't pursue anymore other than violent felon or a threat to the community of harm or death. But back in the day, we chased just about anybody for anything. So. But I think it's the fear of going to jail. I think that's some of them, I guess, think they can outrun us. And back then, I can just about guarantee you not many of them did.
Yeah. But you can't outrun the radio. I mean, that's what I was talking about. Well, I'll tell you that particular incident really didn't sit well with the sheriff. But it wasn't his fault, really, because I just happened to be listening, and we got on the air with it, whatever. But, you know, I watch these things on TV all the time. Maybe that has something to do with it. You know, these knuckleheads sit at home and watch these silly shows about, you know, police pursuits, and they're like, you know, and all of a sudden they're in one like, hey, this be cool, you know, or like the good old boy from Alabama who say, hey, watch this, you know. But I'm just kidding, Chief. So we don't have a protocol for chasing people. We don't do that. Is that right? We don't.
We have pursuit policy, of course, and we chase if it's a violent felon. Let's say, for instance, a bank robbery. We'll chase him, but if the benefit of catching him, if it's at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Fort Campbell Boulevard or 4:30 in the afternoon on Fort Campbell Boulevard, he is putting, or the chase itself is putting people at risk, people at danger, then we still may back off because you have a chance of course, catching him at a later time. The main thing on a pursuit policy, what we do, we do not want to put innocent people at risk.
Even though they are.
Even though they are.
You let the radio do the work. You're like, okay, last seen at Wilma and Trenton Road and whatever, and go from there. So that's probably the best in my opinion. But then I always worry about ambulances and firefighters who have to get there obviously as quick as possible. They're not chasing anyone. They're not being chased, but it's all very risky. And you mentioned Wilma Rudolph, 41A, and so forth. And most all of us, you know, are busy chatting on the phone or texting or, you know, got the radio, in my case, got the radio blaring. You know, I'm singing because I'm a horrible singer. And I don't hear them. I feel bad about that. All of a sudden they're on me. You know, and that's bad, and that's, you know, I do it, and so that's a concern.
Oh, exactly, and I've experienced that. I've been out on the road in a car run by me, running emergency traffic, and I didn't even hear them until they got up on me, and I don't play my music that loud, but it can happen. That just goes back to checking your mirrors, being really attentive, because you pull out in front of one of those things, and ambulance, fire truck, and just bad things happen.
It's not good. All right, the state legislature, and I think we've talked about this before, the state legislature has been debating this texting while driving issue, and I know you guys see a lot of it. You see more than you probably care to talk about. We're even more distracted than we have been while driving, and whether it's music or eating a biscuit or sipping on coffee or trying to eat lunch and do too many things at once. So some people feel like that issue is covered under the, what is it, the distracted driver law. We have a law in the books about being distracted. now they want to specifically, I guess, make it a misdemeanor if you're caught texting. And I see people doing it all the time. They hold it up in front of the wheel so they can see the road. And I just don't see how they do it. I have enough trouble texting as it is. How do you feel about that? Is this just one more thing that you guys have to pay attention to, or will it change the way you patrol or the way you look at traffic?
Well, it's interesting you asked that. When we talk about cell phones, we do a lot of business on cell phones as a police department. Each one of our sergeants has a cell phone, and what that is for, if a citizen wants to call in, they can talk directly to a supervisor. I would suggest, texting while driving is kind of moronic, but people do it, and like I said, we have a lot of things that we have to deal with, and that's just one more. That if the state or city by city ordinance passes a law, I know it was discussed a couple of maybe a year or two ago about cell phone usage, but it would be pretty tough to enforce, to tell you the truth, from our standpoint.
Like the noise ordinance or whatever. Yes, I mean, it's. I've often said, I kind of dig country music. I just don't want to hear it 2 cars back. You know what I'm saying? I hear it from 2 cars back. And when that happens and you hear the loud boom boxes, whatever, so where's a cop? You got so much to do. I almost think like it's, and we've talked before about, that's just one more thing. And I think it's officer discretion, I guess. If you see a guy tooling down the connector road, and he's texting away, I mean, you pull him over and say, dude, you can write him a citation. I guess you can issue him a distracted driver thing or whatever. And
yes, sir.
Does that surprise you? I mean, that so many people do that? It does me.
It does surprise me. Like you mentioned about the guy brushing his teeth, things that people do while driving. You see these guys driving with their dogs in their laps and, Labradors or whatever. One thing I think, I'm speaking from a private citizen standpoint, also law enforcement, is people driving out here without insurance. That is the one topic that I don't think gets talked about as much as it should. We see it all the time, people involved in accidents. You become a victim when you're hit by somebody without insurance. I think sometimes it puzzles me why we talk about, red light cameras and people texting. Come out here, let's make people get insurance out here. Let's make them. That
is absurd. That's a political thing. It hasn't been talked about in years.
Yes, sir. So that to me, as a private citizen, also a law enforcement officer, that I think it kind of that puzzles me why that is not more of a concern.
Mm-hmm. I agree. 5 minutes away from 10. Police Chief Al Ansley is our guest, just ahead of Real Estate Radio here. And Braves baseball coming up today, so stand by here on the network. I was thinking the other day, and I've not asked you this before, but we talk about cell phones. Are you guys getting more and more calls from people in traffic who are like, hey, there's this idiot driving down Warfield, he's swerving everywhere, and I think he's drunk, and, he's texting, and he ain't paying no attention. Y'all need to get an officer out here. You get that a lot more now, I would assume?
Oh, yes, sir. A lot more than we did, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Everybody's got a cell phone. I mean, I've got 2 myself, but, we get a lot of that. And I think it's a benefit for us. You got more eyes out there, citizens out there. A lot of times they'll see somebody speeding or see somebody driving recklessly and wonder why we didn't do anything about it. We have to actually see this, to issue a citation or to make a traffic stop.
Well, here's my point, is I have called twice that I can remember, and because they were very reckless on a very major thoroughfare, had no regard, and I got a license number and so forth. I just really felt like eventually something was going to happen. Not only that, but it ticked me off. But the other thing is the bogus calls that you have to. How do you react to getting those calls? I mean, I know they call 911. It's a city issue. Do they dispatch an officer to that area? Or I just want folks to understand, like, a couple thousand of you can't be calling 911 complaining about a driver because he cut you off. See, I'm wondering how many calls you get because, somebody flipped you off or cut you off or caused you to miss the green light or whatever. I'm just wondering.
Yes, our dispatch, I'm glad you mentioned that. We failed to recognize a lot of our civilian support dispatchers, or they're our lifeline out there. And, we do get a lot of those type of calls, and, yes, we can't respond. And as I mentioned, the cell phones, the sergeants that are out there on the road, a lot of times they have to take a lot of those calls and what we call stack them, because we have other calls of more high importance. If we're responding to a 1052 or 46, which is an accident with injury, we're certainly going to...
I knew that, too.
We're certainly going to respond to that before we are to and I'm not making light of this, a cat in a tree. But we definitely have priorities out there, and that's what we use those cell phones for.
I'm curious. Like yesterday, and this was it's a ridiculous thing, and it turned out to be a ridiculous thing. We made a big hoot out of it, having this groundhog in here, but I didn't know where to start. I didn't call 911. I called the normal office. I called the police department and got an operator, and I said, listen, I don't have a real emergency, but I just kind of need to know what to do and where to go. And so with that said, I got a hold of a dispatcher, and they gave me a sergeant, and the protocol was perfect. I mean, he calls, and very businesslike, and I forget his name, but very businesslike. He said, I understand you got a groundhog. And he said, yes, sir, I do. He said, well, I ain't sending a police officer out there for that. You need to call whatever. I said, okay, I understand. I just need to know where to go. Well, he did send a police officer out here. And it was nice to have that the first response. But nonetheless, I think just people call for everything. I got a headache. I need a cop, there's a cat in my tree. Where's the police? Oh, I've seen and read the most ridiculous 911 calls you could ever imagine, There's a lady. She's holding me up in the grocery line. I can't get, through. It's like, that's not what 911 is for God's sake. So, well, anyway, Chief, we appreciate that. And, of course, aren't we getting close to budget time now? Are you have a wish list of what you're hoping to try to accomplish this year?
Yes, sir. We're getting close to budget time. Interesting. Following the mayor in here, and then, of course, we are up in the middle. It's one of our busiest time of the year from an administrative standpoint. So, yes, sir.
If you were able to get, and I know times are tight, I understand that, but what one thing would you like to be able to provide the officer? You need more officers. Would that be your number one?
Well, actually, we are seeking 16 now. The mayor has approved 16 officers, the grant, which would pay 3 years of their salary, 4 unfunded positions, and 12 additional officers. And also, there was a change this week, and I'm sure he doesn't mind me mentioning this. It's out there. We're taking over parks and the park rangers. So
I meant to mention
a lot of good things happening down there. We'll take the responsibility for the parks also. It's going to take a while for us to get these officers, these park rangers, trained under our policies and procedures. But once we get that done, I think we'll be out there.
So they will automatically become police officers. Will they have to be retrained and
They will have to be retrained. They have to meet all our criteria, all our standards. They're going to have to go back through testing, some of them. If they don't pass it, then they don't meet our standards. But if that happens, then I think we'll see some. It only makes sense that they're certified officers. They're enforcing the laws, and they should be under the police department's control.
Cool. Well, Chief, thanks for coming in. We appreciate it, man. I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you, sir. Always tough following the mayor. I'd just like to mention I have a great deal of respect for him.
Ain't no tough thing to him.
Yes, sir.
He's a piece of cake. Chief, thanks a lot. Police Chief Al Ansley, we appreciate him as always coming by, and thanks for you for being with us here.